I have said repeatedly, I could have written his acceptance speech at the Republican convention that would have won him the election. And he can't get out of his own way. This is still an incredibly close election. All he has to do is show some semblance of normalcy. I mean, you don't have to change who you are. You just have to kind of move over a little bit and talk some sense, and he can't do it.
All right, we are back with Heidi Heitkamp, former Democratic senator from North Dakota. She's the director of the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics, a contributor to ABC News and CNBC, and the founder of One Country Project, which helps facilitate Democrats engaging rural America. What's up, Heidi?
It is so good to be on with you, Tim, and good to see Tyler this morning and know that your girl is off to first grade. Man, time flies.
Time flies. For folks who don't know, my husband used to work for Senator Heitkamp in her office, and that might have something to do with the pinto beans and the hat I'm in. But we're gonna save the gossip till the end. Okay, we're gonna save the gossip till the end. I've got to
get right to the meat of the issue.
Well, we're not gonna do that actually either, because there's a fun little story that I feel like it's the morning, kind of warm us up a little bit. Mark Robinson, you heard of him? He's run for governor.
Yes, can you believe it?
North Carolina. Here's a story out yesterday.
Mr. Porn. Yeah.
According to Louis Money, who worked in several of Greensboro's windowless 24-hour video pornography stores, Robinson came in as often as 5 nights a week to watch porn videos in a private booth. 5 other sources say they saw the same. I mean, hey, at least he had a hobby.
That is so gross, though. It is so gross. I mean, who goes to those places? Even back then, you could get a video. I mean, really, dude.
5 nights a week. I forget who is the sociologist who wrote about the loss of third places.
He needed a release. What can we say? He needed a release.
They said that men really need to have a third place to go to. A bowling alley, an Elks Club. We've lost some of those. And for Mark Robinson, his third place was the porn store, apparently. It does shine a little
kind of man cave.
It does shine a different light on some of his comments. He's called gays maggots, flies, filth. He said that the woman NFL player Ray Rice brought the whooping on herself. It seems like maybe there's a little bit of some personal issues that he's dealing with, I guess.
Well, I mean, and it's you know what, and I hate to say this, behind every person who is that concerned about other people's behavior, I always go, what is he into? What does he do? Yeah. And here it is. I mean, you're busy trying to tell everybody else how to live because you have guilt about how you live.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I don't know. It's not really for me, or I do some on the ground reporting from Greensboro, but I guess we'll just kind of let this one go. Not the Republicans haven't been recruiting their best for some of these.
Yeah, but to kind of put this in political context. Yeah. I think North Carolina is definitely in play because this guy is at the top of their ticket as a gubernatorial candidate and MAGA endorsed, along with Kerry Lake. I mean, Arizona and North Carolina are definitely 2 places where, if Joe Biden were still in this race, he wouldn't be focused on. But they definitely are in play now.
No doubt. The map is expanded. Let's talk a little bit about that. So it was interesting. Maybe last week, I think it was in Politico, Quentin Fulks, who worked for Warnock, who's on the Harris team, one of the kind of leading strategists on the Harris team, was talking about basically a lose by less strategy in rural America, and how Georgia, he was talking about Georgia, but it's also true about North Carolina in particular, how the maps kind of opened up there as they're going to have Harris and Walz campaigning, not just in the metros, but out in the rest of the state. That's something that, you've been pushing for with One Country. So talk about that, and what is a worthwhile use of resources there, and what isn't.
Well, I mean, that the whole point of this is everybody says, oh, well, it's never gonna become Democrat. And you want to say that's right, but you can't lose by 70-30. If you lose by 55-45, let me tell you, you don't need to worry about what all is happening in these campaigns. I mean, think about Wisconsin, huge rural population, Michigan, huge rural population, Pennsylvania, I would say Arizona, Native American, North Carolina, huge minority native or rural population. You pick up 10,000 votes in rural America in each of those states. Completely doable because we used to do it less than 10 years ago. That you win those states, and that's what I've been saying. Everybody is, if you think about mining, it's not the richest vein of ore, but definitely can produce a lot of value if you pay attention to it. And that's why I, started One Country to say, look, you can't keep losing rural America 70-30 and think you're going to be a majority party. You're not going to. You've got to start talking about things that matter in rural America, and most importantly, show up. And that's what Tim Walz has done. He has basically said the Democrats are willing to show up in rural America.
Yeah. Did you get to know him at all? I was kind of thinking, you have your Hot Dish podcast. Feels like you guys might have had a hot dish together at one point, overlapping neighboring states.
Well, Tim called, back when he was being considered, in the very early stages, and said, would you do some national interviews for me? The Times is calling. They want people who know me. And so I did a lot of media before he was selected. And a lot of my friends were like, oh, it's got to be Josh Shapiro. It's got to be Josh Shapiro. And I said, no, I mean, let's get somebody who has more appeal beyond, just Pennsylvania. Now, I may live to regret that statement, given how close Pennsylvania is. But I would tell you that for me, for somebody who has dedicated their life to, as I say, reintroducing the Democratic Party to rural America and rural America to the Democratic Party, he is manna from heaven. Tim is. And so I know Tim very well, not as well as Joel does. And my brother Joel, he's been on Joel's radio show lots of times, and they're kind of the same people, right? Hunter, fisherman, Vikings fans, unapologetically Vikings fans. So they're kind of the same people, only in different states.
Yeah, I'm interested in how you think about this, about like kind of policy versus cultural, kind of appeal, and maybe appeal around issues that don't have like that much of a partisan valence, because you're more moderate than Tim Walz is, or at least right, I think voting record is, and so like when some of us never Trumpers looked at him, we're like, ugh, some of his Minnesota policies were pretty progressive. So like talk about how you can appeal in rural America and more conservative America in a way that's not necessarily like left right, but that's more kind of about values.
Well, it's about culture. I mean, and what's interesting, Tim, is that my daughter called me. She lives in California in the Bay Area, and she got just really excited because she saw all of his videos with his daughter. Fixing the headlight on the car, going to the state fair in Minnesota, just the dad thing. And I think it's interesting because his appeal is beyond rural America. But, I think it's interesting because one of the things you hear all the time, and it's true on both sides, actually, if you look at polling in rural America, they don't think anyone knows their life. But, you take a school teacher from a rural Nebraska town who taught in rural North or Minnesota, he knows your life. And so it's a matter of how do you get him out there? How do you get him energized in kind of that dad rural union vibe that I think is all important to carry some swing voters.
Is there anything else? And if you're, if the campaign was calling you, if he was calling you, and it's like, what are some other things we should be talking about? Like, what are the most effective things we should be talking about when we're kind of out in the rural industrial Midwest, or, kind of outside of the big metros?
Yeah. Why hasn't the House passed a farm bill?
Yeah.
the House of Representatives, they have a majority. They can't get a farm bill across the finish line because at least 20 to 30 Freedom Caucus members in the Republican Party will never vote for a farm bill. So I would just say, look, that lifeline that you and things are not, as your husband can tell you, because I'm sure he still watches the markets.
Yeah.
Things are not what they were the last 2 years in on the farm. People are struggling a little bit more. Commodity prices are down. Weather patterns have taken a hit. That some of the crop in Minnesota didn't get in, some of the crop in North Dakota didn't get in because it was too wet. And so I would be talking about, where's the farm bill? And I would be going to all these farm shows saying, look, we've been the party reliably giving you a farm bill. They've always been reluctant on the farm bill. And now you see it, because we'll probably have to go to a second extension during a time when farmers are struggling economically.
So we've been talking about, and I think the convention, Kamala Harris did just such a good job kind of reaching out to the broadest part of the country with focusing on these themes of kind of patriotism and these sort of traditional Americana themes, and how Tim Walz is trying to do that in rural America. I think it's understated how little Trump is doing on this point. This really jumped out at me yesterday. I was listening to his interview with Lex Fridman, and I want to play this clip for you on how the other side is trying to reach out to the left. Here's Trump.
In the spirit of unity, you used to be a Democrat.
Yeah.
Setting the politicians aside, what do you respect most about people who lean left, who are Democrats themselves or of that persuasion, progressives, liberals, and so on?
Well, look, I respect the fact that everybody's in there. And, to a certain extent, life is what you do while you're waiting to die, so you might as well do a good job. I think in terms of what's happening now, I think, we have a chance to save the country. This country's going down. And I called it with Venezuela. I called it with a lot of different countries. And this country's going down. If we don't win this election, the election coming up on November 5th is the most important election this country's ever had. Because if we don't win it, I don't know that there'll be another election. And it's going to be a communist country.
Okay. Well, Heidi, what do you think about that outreach to the left?
Everybody's got their art of persuasion, the art of the deal right there, the art of the deal.
I just don't even, I was listening to this.
I mean, I honestly, Tim, I have to say, I have said repeatedly, I could have written his acceptance speech at the Republican convention that would have won him the election. Yeah. And he can't get out of his own way. I mean, this is still an incredibly close election. All he has to do is show some semblance of normalcy, to maybe take away the fears that a lot of people have. And he just can't do it. He cannot do it. And it's like, dude, really, you don't have to change who you are. You just have to, kind of move over a little bit and talk some sense. And he can't do it.
Yeah. He's also just a megalomaniac. And I think about the Obama speech. I was kind of moved by Obama's convention speech, just the part where it was very Obama, but it was the kind of stuff that, I don't know, maybe in the pre-Trump era felt a little politician-y, but like now, just given how we all have these experiences where Obama's talking about, you have this person in your life, maybe they're voting for Trump, but they have these traditional American values that we all appreciate, like they worked hard and, they wanted to get by and they're responsible. And it's just like, it's not that hard to just like acknowledge the humanity of people that disagree with you politically. And dude is just totally incapable of thinking about anybody's humanity except himself.
Well, and as a former communications guy for Jeb Bush, I mean, think of the target-rich environment you would have had to fashion a very statesman-like speech for his acceptance.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, he was too busy worrying about the audience in front of him instead of the millions of people watching at home who wanted to see, has he changed? Has this horrific event changed him? I said I would have started the event saying there is no room for political violence in our country. We need to cut it out. And, to the extent that we, in the Republican Party have had any part in this, it ends today. We are going to have a conversation about the future of America without demonizing each other. Think of what would have happened for him politically if he had given that speech.
Yeah. And he could have done that. We're not going back, right? That Kamala ended up taking this, right? Like, we lived through political violence before, and like, we're not going to do that. I'm a unifier. I was a TV show. Like, he used to be a Democrat, and Lex put it on the T for him. Like, he could have. It's. I know that people listen to this podcast, obviously, because we all have Trump derangement syndrome. It's hard for us to like wrap our heads around this. But in 2016, a lot of the people that voted for him like did kind of see him as unifying, right? Because they saw like Clinton's as like this old divisive partisan thing, and like Trump like wasn't as crazy conservative as Ted Cruz and some of these social conservative guys, and like it just did, and he just can't fucking do it. That's what it comes out to. He's just too flawed of a person.
He doesn't have an ideology. He only has ambition, and that made him less scary because he wasn't an ideologue, but it made him more pliable, right? Does that make sense to you?
For sure. No, absolutely.
And so as a result, he has led the way, honestly, in terms of dividing this country. I mean, he is at the kitchen table in so many households on a regular basis. And one of the things that I will tell you, which isn't widely reported, but those of us who live in Trump country, who can tell you what the landscape looked like in 16, and then again in 2020, it was crazy, like Trump flags and on the back of pickups. You don't see it. You don't see the red hats like you used to. Doesn't mean they're not voting for him, but they are not like exuberantly voting for him. They're like, okay, we don't like her, so we're going to go with the other guy.
Are you getting yelled at in public? I do think of some of my cowardly former Republican colleagues who don't, who kind of use this as an excuse to not come out against Trump. But you don't, like, when you're back in North Dakota, you're not taking any shit from people, are you?
Well, I mean, it's not like I've changed who I am. So, what I just think it's just so, well, they might write a nasty comment about me. Don't read them. Do the right thing. Be an ad in the world of John Kelly, who, said what he said, but is somewhere in a bunker. I don't know. Be a Adam Kinzinger. Be a Liz Cheney. Step up. Step up for our democracy. I mean, it just infuriates me. It's like somebody might write something mean about me. Really? Welcome to my world. I mean, the thing that I think is so interesting is all of these people who have existed in blue states or red states, politicians both, who have never had any challenges except, maybe the progressives won't like me today. Get over it. Get over it. I mean, Tim, when I was running for governor in 2020 or in 2000, I got breast cancer, and people always ask me, how did getting cancer change you? I said, losing an election changed me. I mean, I stopped caring so much about what people thought and started thinking about what's the right thing to do. Get over it. I mean, as Trump rightfully said, we're just waiting around until we die.
Yeah, right. Very astute. We're all just sitting around waiting to die. Unclear what that means about.
I know, but there's some truth to that, and you don't know tomorrow what's going to happen. I think all those generals, McMaster just wrote an incredibly, and they think, oh, I said it once. Well, this is not chain of command in the military. This is a campaign. It's politics, and the mother's milk, as you know, of political communication is repetition. I mean, you got to say it over and over and over again, and it's got to come out of your mouth and not in an ad.
All right. I want you to take off your rural hat for a second, put on your finance hat, your CNBC hat. I want to play some audio. We discussed yesterday Pat Toomey. former senator for Pennsylvania, not going as far as I would want, and I'm sure you would want to endorse Kamala, but he's clearly saying he's not going to endorse Trump, and that got Joe Kernen, your sometimes sparring partner on CNBC, a little flustered. And I want to play a little bit of Joe Kernen talking about this, and it's almost like we got a secret audio tape between two guys arguing at the club, like two finance guys arguing at the club, listening to this. So I want to listen to it as kind of an anthropological document. Let's listen.
Okay, 28% corporate taxes, 45% capital
I get it.
gains,
So the answer to that
gains
is Republican control of the Senate. And that is absolutely essential. If the other side runs the table, then Katie barred the door. They will repeal the filibuster, and they will be dragged by their left wing, which clearly is in charge now. And I think Kamala Harris proved that with her vice presidential election. And it's huge tax increases. It's probably some version of Medicare for all. It might even get to an expansion of the Supreme Court because there will be no breaks. But the good news is, I think Republicans are going to take the Senate.
Right. Perhaps, but there's plenty of regulatory moves, as we've seen from Biden. There's sort of executive orders. There's plenty of things that even if the Senate does.
Well, yes, there is damage that will be done there. However, a Republican Senate can mitigate that also by its power of confirmation.
Lots to unpack there. I'm curious your view on both. Well, one, the Pat Toomey's assessment of what the Democrats would do if they got 50 votes in the Senate. And then secondly, when you're talking to folks that are making the Joe Kernen argument, but 45% capital gain, like what's the best pushback that you have on those points?
Number one, she can't do any of those things unilaterally. It's going to take, a lot of compromise, a lot of, would I do what Kamala suggested she would do with taxes? No. I mean, I think that you've got the Supreme Court that is not going to allow taxation, I think, of unrealized capital gain. But she walked into that space and shouldn't have. So I'm, to me, Pat is overstating what a Democratic Senate would do. There's no way. I mean, if John Tester returns, which seems essential to the majority, he is not. I mean, he flat ass told people, I am not allowing you to tax capital gains that are unrealized. And so there are a number of people in the Democratic column who disagree with a lot of these policies that Pat's talking about. But think about this. If Trump gets in, he says, I'm going to put a 10% tariff across the board on every import, and then 40%, I think, on China.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, if Pat Toomey thinks that Democratic policies will cost middle America something, he knows what those tariffs are. Those tariffs are a direct tax on American consumers. And if I had been on with Pat like I was supposed to be, because we ran into a glitch, a technology glitch yesterday morning, I would have said, Pat, you and I co-sponsored legislation to roll back the presidential power on tariffs. So in Trump, never mind all of this stuff that you're saying Kamala Harris is going to do.
Yeah.
That and I'm not a what about this guy typically, but campaigns are about differences. That Trump's policies, especially on tariffs, which he can do unilaterally. Yeah. I mean, people don't realize that the president has incredible power to unilaterally impose tariffs on imports. Those will cost middle America and will be highly inflationary. So what are you doing to prevent that? Of course, he's not a Trump supporter. Yeah. I mean, in fairness, and I think Pat, he might have voted for one of the impeachments. And,
he did, the second one.
Pat, I actually like Pat Toomey. We've done a lot of, when we agree, he's an excellent partner on anything that you want to get done. And the bottom line is he's predictable. He is an old Club for Growth. That's where he came out of, if you remember. He ran the Club for Growth and then became a senator. He has a true philosophical, ideological kind of direction that he wants to lead the country. You may not agree with it, but it's predictable, it's principled. it's principled disagreement. And, what he's telling you is that he's not voting for Trump.
Yeah, which is good. What would you say to your buddy, though, if he calls you and starts talking about how I just like this whole principle that the left is running the Democratic Party
Oh, yeah.
is like taken as like just this accepted gospel on, among the Joe Kernen crowd. And it's like, I just like, what is the evidence of it? Like what, like the like liberal, like progressives win no primaries. Cori Bush has lost recently her primary. Jamal Bowman lost his primary. Like there's no examples of like DSA candidates.
And if you had listened to AOC's speech at the convention, you said if you were a Democratic socialist, you said sell out. She's selling out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a matter of what people see as left. Is paid family leave? Is that a leftist policy? Is the Affordable Care Act and expansion of Medicaid? Is that leftist? Everything that they consider leftist is pretty popular policy in middle America. I mean, Tim Walz doing something about daycare, reducing daycare costs, a child credit. All of these things are incredibly popular, and they want to redefine what the middle is. Let me tell you, the middle is more left than what people want to define it as.
Okay, so we're gonna hope that Bob Casey closes his ears when I say this to you, but maybe you can just call up Pat Toomey and just be like, hey Pat, endorse Kamala and McCormick together. It helped Kamala and it would help McCormick because it would give both of them credit with the middle. You don't have to admit that you're going to do that, but maybe just send him a little text. Just send him. That's my suggestion, because why not? He doesn't want Trump. Why not just say it? Pat Toomey for Kamala could help us.
What is amazing is the gutless Republicans who want Kamala to do their dirty work and get rid of Trump. Guess what? Trump's not going away anytime soon because you guys basically built a foundation on him. That instead of opposing him like they did in 2016, now they have all capitulated. They're all appeasers, in their own party, and they just want him to go away. I mean, think about what Mitch McConnell just said about Ukraine. I mean, he said it wasn't Democrats that stopped Ukraine funding; it was Republicans. Which is pretty remarkable for Mitch to call out his own party, but that and Mitch was clearly not on the Trump bandwagon until he thought it was essential for a Senate majority. And we'll see what happens. The Senate was always going to be challenged in this cycle. Joe Manchin, this is my cycle. This is the class that I came in with in 12, and there were two people who dodged the 18 bullet that Claire and I and Joe Donnelly weren't able. Mark Pryor was the year before. That was the year of the Marks. Yeah. I always say Mark Pryor, Mark Baggage, Mark Udall. That was the beginning of the challenges that was during Obama's second term. It's his second term midterm where we really lost big.
So any advice for those guys, Tester and Sherrod, this time? Or any feelings about those races?
Tester's race, 10,000 votes could change the nature of the Senate. If Tester wins, we win the Senate, in my opinion. I think Sherrod's he's in a state that's +4 or 5 for Trump. So it's easier to rely on some swing voters. Tester is what, +15?
15.
And that's big headwinds. He's got to convince a lot of people. That isn't easy anymore. When I ran in 12, I was able to convince 22% of Romney voters to vote for me. Unheard of, right? In today's politics. When I ran again, it was only 4.
Romney's people hadn't even heard of it. I remember being in Boston that night, like late at the night, sitting next to people, and they're like, "Who is Heidi Heitkamp?" Heidi Heitkamp is going to win in North Dakota, and it was just wasn't even on the radar of. It was obviously for the Senate committee people, but like the presidential campaign side, that race wasn't even on the radar.
Yeah, well, it was funny because I did an interview with Nate Silver on his new book,
Yeah,
On the Edge, which is really an interesting book.
it is.
Um, anyways, in Chicago, and I always tease him because we did ABC together. He used to be with 538, started 538, and then he was an ABC did commentary for ABC. And so I said, hey, what made his reputation was the 12 election where he called every race right but mine. So of course I always have to twist the knife a little bit. But that tells you something about whether Tester can overcome the odds, where people can get to know you. But the sad thing, Tim, and people out there will wonder. It used to be when you were Kent Conrad or Byron Dorgan or Tim Daschle, all you had to do was do right by your state, and people would overcome their tribalism and vote for you. I did everything that I could. Your husband, Tyler, knows that. I mean, we sweat bullets for rural America. We did incredible work for the state of North Dakota, and it didn't matter. In fact, people would say that, yeah, she's been a good senator, but I'm a Republican and I'm voting for a Republican Senate.
Yeah. It's the local news. I could have a longer thing about this, but that's really what this comes down to fundamentally is when people are getting most of their news from local news, farm radio, then they heard more about the substantive things that the politicians were happening. Now, not everybody, obviously, but most of the people that you're talking about that you need in North Dakota are getting most of their news from Fox, talk radio, conservative talk radio, their Facebook feeds, and maybe they're also getting, and if they're actually farmers, they're also getting farm news. Like they're, maybe they watch the local news at night too, but the balance is totally flipped, and you're being demonized. And I just don't know how to unwind that. Like that's
you got to show up. I mean, one of the pieces of advice I had for Vilsack when he took over at USDA is every morning for an hour, get up early. And you're in the Eastern time zone, doesn't have to be that early. Call into early morning talk radio in rural America and talk about what you're doing. Answer questions, take some call-ins. I mean, show up. Hello, show up. You aren't going to get everybody, trust me, but you're going to get people talking about, the reason why we have that rural hospital that's still functioning in rural America is because the expansion of Medicaid into rural America. The reason why farmers can afford health insurance, guess what? It's subsidies on the Affordable Care Act. The reason why we have mental health coverage, the reason why we have the local grocery store. I mean, you've got tons of really pieces of good news that aren't being heard. I told this story in Chicago. I said, Vilsack told me this once. He went to an event where it was a ribbon cutting for a business that was started in rural America. And the business owner came over to him and said, "What are you doing here?" He goes, "Well, we basically guaranteed the loan to the bank that you got. And so this whole project is basically guaranteed by the federal government." And the business owner said, "No, it's not." Yeah. And you're like, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. I mean, they don't know how significant the investment in rural America, what that means for rural America, and how vulnerable it is if they continue to vote just one way.
Yeah. All right. Well, the most common question I get, Heidi, is not, about my really funny lines about emotional support cougars or my past as a Republican or anything. It is, what is the deal with the Buxton, North Dakota Pinto Bean bag behind your head? We get it. Literally everyone that has ever lived within 100 miles of Buxton, I think, has emailed the info at the Bulwark line with this question. So why don't you tell people, why do I have the Buxton Pinto Bean bag poster?
Because your husband fell in love with the logo when we were doing a site tour in Buxton of the bean plant. And, this is a place where you clean beans, bag them, and ship them out. Unknown to a lot of people, North Dakota is number one in a lot of edibles. By that, I mean pintos, black beans. In fact, we're a huge exporter of black beans.
Not gummies.
And no, not gummies. I mean, really protein-rich plant-based edibles. And so Tyler picked it up, and I didn't know that he had framed it until I saw it behind you, and I'm like, yay, that is so great. But we're very, very proud of the role that we play in feeding America. And it's not just wheats, corn, and soybeans. I think as the market grows for more and more plant-based protein, North Dakota is well positioned to expand that market. In fact, my brother-in-law is harvesting edibles as we speak. We call them edibles. I know that is so old lady, right? Edibles. I don't mean gummies. I don't mean gummies.
I love it. Well, our friends at the Central Valley Bean Co-op did send me some North Dakota chocolate-covered Ruffles as a thank you for having it on. Having it on, and those are yummy. So we'll have to get out there to do
They're really
it.
great.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much for doing this, Heidi. We'll have to bring you back soon. I appreciate you so much. And everybody go check out One Country. Go check out the Hot Dish podcast. And we'll be back tomorrow with friend of the pod, David Frum. See y'all then. Peace.